only grizzly bear. Cries every day in the zoo until she recognizes a familiar figure. Let us know where you're watching from. If you love my content, consider supporting it with a super thanks. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe. It'll help us to remain in touch with amazing people like you. The early morning sunlight filtered through the tall maple trees surrounding Pinewood Zoo, casting dappled shadows across the cobblestone pathways. Visitors had yet to arrive, but the staff bustled about preparing for another busy day. The peaceful ambiance was shattered by a low, mournful cry that echoed through the empty corridors. It was a sound that had become all too familiar to the zookeepers, the sorrowful wail of Aurora, the female grizzly bear. Aurora stood at the edge of her spacious enclosure, her massive paws pressed against the reinforced glass. Her chocolate-brown fur appeared dull in the morning light, lacking the healthy sheen it once had. Her eyes, deep pools of amber, stared out beyond the glass barrier, beyond the zoo walls, as if searching for something, or someone, in the distance. Another heart-wrenching cry escaped her throat, causing birds to scatter from nearby trees. "She's at it again," Olivia Chen whispered to her colleague, Marcus Davis. The two zookeepers stood at a respectful distance, clipboards in hand, documenting Aurora's behavior as they did every morning. Marcus nodded solemnly. "That's the 5th day in a row she's refused her breakfast. I'm getting worried." Aurora had arrived at Pinewood Zoo 6 months ago after her previous wildlife sanctuary lost funding and closed down. Since then, she had shown signs of deep distress, pacing endlessly, ignoring enrichment toys, and most concerning of all, crying out every afternoon at precisely 3 o'clock. The zoo veterinarians had examined her thoroughly, finding no physical ailments to explain her behavior. "Did you check the records again?" Olivia asked, her dark eyes reflecting concern. "There must be something in her history that explains why she's so unhappy." Marcus flipped through the documents attached to his clipboard. "Not much here. She was rescued as a cub after a forest fire, spent 5 years at Northridge Wildlife Sanctuary before it shut down. No mention of any special attachments or behavioral issues." As they spoke, Aurora abandoned her post by the glass and shuffled to a far corner of her habitat. There, partially hidden by a cluster of artificial rocks, lay a tattered green blanket. The bear gently nosed the fabric, a soft whimper escaping her throat as she curled her massive body around it. It was the only object from her past life that she seemed to care about, and the zookeepers had been instructed to leave it untouched during habitat cleanings. "There's something about that blanket," Olivia mused, making a note in her observations. "It's like a security blanket for her. I've never seen anything like it." The day progressed as usual. Visitors streamed in. Children pressed their faces against the glass of Aurora's enclosure, and tour guides recited facts about grizzly bears in the wild. Aurora remained in her corner, occasionally lifting her head when footsteps approached, only to sink down again in apparent disappointment. As the afternoon wore on, the crowd around Aurora's enclosure grew. Regular visitors knew about her daily crying ritual, and some even planned their visits specifically to witness it. At precisely 2:55 p.m., Aurora rose from her resting spot, the green blanket delicately held between her teeth. She dragged it to the center of her habitat, placed it carefully on the ground, and then lifted her massive head toward the sky. "She's about to start," whispered a woman to her young daughter, pointing at the bear. Phones were raised, ready to capture the moment. At exactly 3 o'clock, Aurora released a cry so filled with longing and grief that several visitors stepped back, visibly moved. It wasn't the aggressive roar one might expect from a bear, but rather a mournful, almost human-like wail that sent chills down the spines of everyone present. "Why is she so sad, Mommy?" asked the little girl, her bottom lip quivering. "I don't know, sweetie," the mother replied, her own eyes glistening with tears. Among the crowd stood Dr. Eleanor Reynolds, the zoo's head veterinarian, who had been observing Aurora for weeks. Her brow furrowed as she watched the bear's ritual unfold. Something wasn't adding up. Aurora's behavior wasn't typical of bears in captivity. This seemed more like grief, a profound emotional response to loss. As the crowd began to disperse after Aurora's display, Dr. Reynolds approached Olivia and Marcus. "I want to try something different," she said, her voice filled with determination. "I'm going to reach out to the staff from Northridge. Someone there must know more about Aurora's past." Later that evening, after the zoo had closed, Dr. Reynolds sat in her office, the phone pressed to her ear. She had spent hours tracking down former employees of the now-defunct Northridge Wildlife Sanctuary. "Yes, I understand it's been some time," she said into the receiver, "but any information you have about Aurora would be invaluable. She's displaying signs of severe distress." The person on the other end was silent for a moment before speaking. "You should talk to Rebecca Morgan. She was Aurora's primary caretaker from the day she arrived as a cub. If anyone knows what's wrong with Aurora, it would be her." Dr. Reynolds scribbled the name on a notepad. "Do you have her contact information?" "Last I heard, she moved to Alaska to work at a conservation center. That's all I know." The call ended, leaving Dr. Reynolds with more questions than answers. Who was Rebecca Morgan, and what connection did she have with Aurora that could cause such profound grief in the bear? The search for Rebecca Morgan began the next day, with Dr. Reynolds reaching out to conservation centers across Alaska. Meanwhile, Aurora's condition worsened. She refused food entirely, her once robust frame beginning to show signs of weight loss. Her afternoon cries grew longer, more desperate, as if she were calling out to someone who never answered. A week passed with no leads on Rebecca Morgan's whereabouts. The zoo director, prompted by concerns for Aurora's health, called an emergency meeting to discuss options for her care. "We might need to consider anti-anxiety medication," suggested one specialist. "Or perhaps transferring her to a different facility," offered another. As they debated, a timid knock sounded at the conference room door. Julia, the young receptionist from the front office, poked her head in. "I'm sorry to interrupt," she said, "but there's someone here asking about Aurora. Says her name is Rebecca Morgan." The room fell silent. Dr. Reynolds was the first to react, pushing back her chair and hurrying to the lobby. There, standing by the reception desk, was a woman in her early 30s with auburn hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. She wore hiking boots and a weathered jacket, the kind used by someone who spent most of their time outdoors. "Miss Morgan?" Dr. Reynolds approached cautiously. "I'm Dr. Eleanor Reynolds, the head veterinarian here." Rebecca turned, her green eyes tired but alert. "I came as soon as I heard. Is she okay? Is Aurora all right?" Dr. Reynolds gestured for Rebecca to follow her to a quieter area. "How did you find out about Aurora's condition?" Rebecca pulled out her phone, showing a viral video of Aurora's sorrowful crying. "It's all over social media. Someone tagged me because they knew I worked with her at Northridge." Her voice broke slightly. "I would have come sooner if I'd known she was here. I've been in the backcountry of Alaska for months with limited connectivity." "What can you tell me about your relationship with Aurora?" Dr. Reynolds asked gently. Rebecca's eyes filled with tears. "I raised her from a cub. Her mother died in a forest fire and she was badly burned. I nursed her back to health, sleeping beside her enclosure for months until she recovered." She reached into her bag and pulled out a photo. A much younger Rebecca cradling a small bear cub wrapped in a familiar green blanket. That blanket, Dr. Reynolds breathed. She still has it. She carries it with her every day. Rebecca nodded, wiping away a tear. I gave it to her on her first night at the sanctuary. It was all I had in my car to keep her warm. She looked up at Dr. Reynolds, her expression pleading. When Northridge closed, I fought to keep her with me, but I wasn't certified to care for a full-grown grizzly. They told me she was going to a specialized bear sanctuary in Montana. I had no idea she ended up here. And the crying at 3 o'clock? Dr. Reynolds asked. That was when I would always visit her after my shift, Rebecca explained, her voice barely above a whisper. Every day for 5 years, never missed a single day. Even when I was sick, I'd drag myself there. She's looking for me. The realization hit both women simultaneously. Aurora wasn't just displaying stereotypical captive behavior. She was grieving for her lost friend, calling out for her every day at the exact time they used to be together. "Can I see her?" Rebecca asked, hope and fear mingling in her voice. Dr. Reynolds hesitated, considering the zoo's protocols, but seeing the genuine concern in Rebecca's eyes, she nodded. "Follow me." As they approached Aurora's enclosure, the bear was in her usual corner, the green blanket clutched close. The afternoon visitors had thinned out, leaving the area relatively quiet. "Wait here, Doctor," Reynolds instructed, positioning Rebecca just out of sight of the enclosure. "I want to observe her reaction." Dr. Reynolds opened the staff door that led to the keeper's entrance of Aurora's habitat. The bear's head lifted at the sound, but she showed little interest, having grown accustomed to the comings and goings of the zoo staff. "Aurora," Dr. Reynolds called softly, watching the bear's reaction. Aurora blinked slowly, acknowledging the veterinarian's presence with minimal interest before turning her attention back to her blanket. Dr. Reynolds nodded to Rebecca, who stepped forward, her heart pounding. She stood at the edge of the keeper's area, separated from Aurora by a safety barrier. "Aurora?" Rebecca's voice trembled as she spoke the bear's name. The effect was instantaneous. Aurora's head snapped up, her ears perked forward, and her entire body tensed. She rose to her full height, sniffing the air frantically. "It's me, girl," Rebecca said, a little louder this time. "I'm here." Aurora let out a sound unlike any she had made before. Not a mournful cry, but a rumbling, excited vocalization that echoed through the enclosure. She abandoned her precious blanket and rushed toward the keeper's entrance, pressing herself against the safety barrier that separated her from Rebecca. Visitors gathered, drawn by the bear's unusual behavior. Phones were raised once again, but this time to capture a moment of joy rather than sorrow. Through the safety mesh, Rebecca extended her hand. Aurora pressed her nose against it, inhaling deeply, confirming what her ears had already told her. Her beloved friend had returned. "I missed you too," Rebecca whispered, tears streaming freely down her face now. "I'm so sorry I left you." Aurora made a soft huffing sound, her amber eyes fixed on Rebecca's face, as if drinking in every detail. Gone was the listless, grieving animal from moments before. In her place stood an alert, engaged bear, her eyes bright with recognition and what could only be described as happiness. Dr. Reynolds watched in amazement as Aurora's entire demeanor transformed. The bear, that had refused food for days, suddenly seemed interested in the apple Rebecca produced from her pocket, taking it gently through the mesh. "This is extraordinary, Doctor," Reynolds murmured, making mental notes of everything she observed. "I've never seen anything like it." As Rebecca continued to talk softly to Aurora, stroking her fur through the barrier, a small crowd of zoo staff and visitors gathered at a respectful distance. Among them was the zoo director, his expression a mixture of astonishment and concern as he approached Dr. Reynolds. "What's going on here?" he asked quietly. "A miracle, I think," Dr. Reynolds replied, not taking her eyes off the reunion unfolding before them, "and perhaps the beginning of a new chapter for Aurora." The sun began to dip lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the zoo grounds. But for the first time in 6 months, as 3 o'clock came and went, Aurora did not cry out in despair. Instead, she remained pressed against the barrier, as close as she could get to Rebecca, making soft, contented sounds that touched the hearts of everyone present. In that moment, as human and bear reconnected across species barriers, it became clear that some bonds transcend understanding, creating connections that neither time nor distance can sever. For Aurora, the recognition of a familiar figure had transformed her world from one of isolation and grief to one filled with the possibility of joy once again. As twilight descended over Pinewood Zoo, the last visitors reluctantly departed, many lingering to catch final glimpses of the remarkable reunion between Aurora and Rebecca. The zoo director, Kenneth Blackwood, stood with his arms crossed, observing the scene with a mixture of wonder and apprehension. "Dr. Reynolds," he said, gesturing for the veterinarian to join him a few paces away from Rebecca and Aurora. "While this is undoubtedly an extraordinary moment, we need to discuss the implications." Dr. Reynolds nodded, though her eyes remained on the pair. "Of course. This woman, Rebecca, she can't stay here indefinitely. We have protocols, liability concerns." He lowered his voice. "And what happens when she leaves again? We'll have an even more distressed bear on our hands." His concerns were valid, but Dr. Reynolds had already begun formulating a plan. "With all due respect, sir, I believe this presents an unprecedented opportunity, not just for Aurora's welfare, but for the zoo's research on animal cognition and emotional bonds." The director raised an eyebrow. "Go on." "What if we offered Rebecca a position here? She clearly has exceptional skills with bears, and we've been looking to expand our enrichment program." Dr. Reynolds gestured toward Aurora, who was now sitting peacefully by the barrier, a complete transformation from her previous state. Plus, the public response to this story could be tremendous. Imagine the educational value. Kenneth Blackwood was nothing if not practical. The video of Aurora's emotional reunion with Rebecca was already spreading across social media platforms. By morning, Pinewood Zoo would be at the center of worldwide attention. "Let me think about it," he said finally. "In the meantime, Miss Morgan can stay until closing procedures are complete. Tomorrow, we'll need to make some decisions." As the director walked away, Dr. Reynolds returned to Rebecca, who hadn't moved from her spot near Aurora. "She looks so different," Rebecca whispered, watching as Aurora calmly groomed herself. "It's like she's a different bear." "She is," Dr. Reynolds confirmed. "You've brought her back to life." She hesitated before adding, "The director has agreed to let you stay until closing time, but we'll need to discuss a more permanent arrangement tomorrow." Rebecca's face fell. "I can't leave her again, not now that she knows I'm here." "I know, and I'm going to do everything I can to make sure you don't have to." Dr. Reynolds placed a reassuring hand on Rebecca's shoulder. "For tonight, though, we need to prepare Aurora for your departure. It might help if you establish a routine, something to let her know you'll be back." Rebecca thought for a moment, then reached into her pocket and pulled out a small wooden whistle carved in the shape of a bear. "I used to use this to call her for feeding time at Northridge. She always responded to it." Dr. Reynolds nodded encouragingly. Perfect. Use it now, and then again when you return tomorrow. It might help her understand that you're not disappearing forever. As the zoo's closing procedures began, Rebecca reluctantly prepared to leave. She blew the whistle softly, producing a gentle, melodic sound that immediately captured Aurora's attention. "I'll be back tomorrow, girl, I promise," Rebecca said, her voice thick with emotion. She pressed her palm against the mesh one last time, and Aurora mirrored the gesture with her massive paw. Dr. Reynolds escorted Rebecca to the zoo entrance, where the night guard, an elderly man named Walter, waited to let them out. "Heard about what happened with the Grizzly," Walter said, his weathered face breaking into a smile. "Been working here 15 years, never seen anything like it." "It was pretty special," Rebecca acknowledged, exhaustion and emotion evident in her voice. "You got somewhere to stay tonight?" Dr. Reynolds asked suddenly. Realizing she hadn't considered this aspect of Rebecca's sudden appearance, Rebecca shrugged. "I'll find a hotel. I literally flew in and came straight here from the airport." "Nonsense," Dr. Reynolds declared. "My apartment isn't far, and I have a perfectly good couch. We have a lot to discuss anyway if we're going to convince the director to let you stay." As the two women left the zoo grounds, neither noticed the dark figure watching from the shadows near the administrative building. Cameron Foster, the newly appointed board member of Pinewood Zoo, observed their departure with keen interest, then pulled out his phone and dialed a number. "It's me," he said quietly. "You were right. Morgan showed up today just like you predicted." He listened for a moment. "No, I don't think anyone's made the connection yet, but it's only a matter of time." Another pause. "Yes, I understand the urgency. I'll handle it." Foster ended the call and glanced back toward Aurora's enclosure, now quiet in the gathering darkness. His face hardened with resolve as he walked briskly toward the parking lot, keys in hand. The next morning dawned bright and clear, with a crispness in the air that hinted at the approaching autumn. Dr. Reynolds and Rebecca arrived at the zoo an hour before opening, both women tired but determined after a night spent strategizing. "Remember," Dr. Reynolds cautioned as they approached the administration building, "let me do most of the talking. Director Blackwood respects research and revenue above all else." Rebecca nodded, though her thoughts were clearly with Aurora. "Do you think she had a good night?" The night keeper reported she slept peacefully for the first time since her arrival. Dr. Reynolds replied with a smile. "No pacing, no crying. She kept her blanket close, though." Relief washed over Rebecca's face. "That's something, at least." As they entered the building, they were immediately confronted by a flurry of activity. Staff members rushed about, phones rang incessantly, and in the center of it all stood Kenneth Blackwood, barking orders with the efficiency of a military commander. He spotted them and waved them over. "Reynolds!" Just the person I needed to see, and Ms. Morgan, perfect timing. The director's office was spacious but utilitarian, with large windows overlooking the zoo grounds. Laid out on his desk were several newspapers and a tablet displaying various news websites. "We've gone viral," he announced, gesturing to the headlines. "Heartbroken bear reunites with former caretaker." It's the top story on every major network. Indeed, photographs of Aurora and Rebecca's reunion dominated the screens. One particularly moving image showed the bear with her paw pressed against the mesh, mirroring Rebecca's hand on the other side. "Our website crashed overnight from the traffic," Blackwood continued, a hint of excitement breaking through his usually stoic demeanor. "The marketing team estimates we'll see a 300% increase in visitors today." Dr. Reynolds exchanged a knowing glance with Rebecca. This was better than they could have hoped for, The director was already seeing the financial benefits of their reunion. "I've been thinking about your suggestion, Reynolds," Blackwood said, settling into his chair, "about offering Miss Morgan a position here." Rebecca straightened, hope flickering across her face. "Before we discuss that," the director continued, "I need to understand exactly what happened at Northridge Sanctuary, why it closed, and how Aurora ended up here instead of the Bear Sanctuary in Montana." Rebecca's expression clouded. "Northridge was struggling financially for years. We relied heavily on private donations, and when our main benefactor passed away unexpectedly, his children weren't interested in continuing his support." She paused, collecting her thoughts. "The closure happened quickly. We had just weeks to place all our animals. I was told Aurora would go to the Montana Sanctuary, where I plan to visit her regularly. But then I was offered a position in Alaska, tracking wild bear populations in remote areas. By the time I discovered Aurora wasn't in Montana, I was deep in the backcountry with limited communication." "And you never thought to check on her before leaving?" Blackwood's tone was neutral, but the question hit a nerve. Rebecca's eyes flashed. "Of course I did. I called Montana multiple times. They kept saying her transfer was delayed, but assured me she would be arriving." Her voice hardened. "Someone lied to me." An uncomfortable silence fell over the room. Dr. Reynolds cleared her throat. "Director, I've reviewed Aurora's transfer documents. They came through a third-party wildlife relocation service. It's possible there was a legitimate mix-up." Blackwood nodded slowly. "Very well. Now, regarding your potential employment, Miss Morgan—" A sharp knock interrupted him, and the door swung open to reveal a tall, distinguished-looking man in an expensive suit. "Ah, Cameron," Blackwood said, rising to his feet. "Perfect timing. Let me introduce you to Dr. Eleanor Reynolds, our head veterinarian, and Rebecca Morgan, Aurora's former caretaker." Cameron Foster stepped forward, extending his hand first to Dr. Reynolds, then to Rebecca. "A pleasure to meet you both. I've heard remarkable things about your reunion with Aurora." Rebecca accepted his handshake, but something in his smile didn't quite reach his eyes. "Thank you. Cameron joined our board of directors 3 months ago," Blackwood explained. "He's been instrumental in securing new funding for our expansion projects, including the new predator complex," Foster added smoothly, "which, coincidentally, is why I'm here this morning. There's been a development regarding Aurora." Dr. Reynolds frowned. "What kind of development?" "I should have been informed of any changes to her care." Foster held up a placating hand. "Nothing concerning her immediate welfare, Doctor. But in light of yesterday's events and the public interest it's generated, I've been in contact with the Wildlife Conservation Foundation." He turned to Rebecca. "They're very interested in Aurora's case, particularly her strong emotional response to you, Ms. Morgan. They've offered to fund a comprehensive research study on animal-human bonds, with Aurora as the centerpiece." "That sounds promising, Doctor," Reynolds said cautiously. "What exactly would this study entail?" Foster smiled. "For starters, they'd like to transport Aurora to their research facility in Colorado. State-of-the-art equipment, expansive natural habitats." "Transport her?" Rebecca interrupted, alarm evident in her voice. "After she's just found stability? That would traumatize her all over again." "The Foundation would want you involved, of course," Foster continued smoothly. "They're prepared to offer you a generous consultant position." Rebecca shook her head firmly. "Aurora stays here. She's been through enough transitions." An awkward silence fell over the room. Dr. Reynolds studied Foster's face, noting the slight tightening around his mouth. the only indication that Rebecca's refusal had irritated him. "Perhaps we should discuss this further after everyone's had time to consider the options," Blackwood suggested diplomatically. "In the meantime, Miss Morgan, I'd like to offer you a temporary position as a special consultant on Aurora's care. 3 months, with the possibility of extension based on her progress and the research potential Dr. Reynolds has outlined." Relief washed over Rebecca's face. "Thank you. I accept." "Excellent," Blackwood said, rising to his feet. "Reynolds will handle the paperwork and show you to the staff facilities, and I believe you have a bear waiting to see you." As they left the office, Foster's voice stopped them in the corridor. "Miss Morgan, a word?" Rebecca glanced at Dr. Reynolds, who nodded reassuringly. "I'll meet you by Aurora's enclosure." Once they were alone, Foster's pleasant demeanor shifted subtly. "I feel I should warn you. The Wildlife Conservation Foundation is not accustomed to being refused. They've invested considerable resources in tracking Aurora's case." Rebecca frowned. "Tracking her case? What does that mean?" "Simply that they've been monitoring her progress since her transfer from Northridge." His voice lowered. "They have a particular interest in bears that have formed unusual attachments to humans. Studies suggest it may be linked to certain neurological adaptations." A chill ran down Rebecca's spine. "Who exactly are you representing, Mr. Foster? Because it sounds like you have more than the zoo's interests at heart." Foster's smile returned, smooth as glass. "I represent progress, Miss Morgan, and sometimes progress requires difficult choices." He checked his expensive watch. "Enjoy your reunion with Aurora. We'll speak again soon." As he walked away, Rebecca stood frozen in the corridor, a sense of unease settling over her. Something wasn't right, but she couldn't quite place what. Shaking off the feeling, she hurried toward Aurora's enclosure, determined to focus on what mattered most, helping her bear find happiness again. When she reached the habitat, Dr. Reynolds was already there, speaking with Olivia and Marcus. "There she is," Olivia said warmly as Rebecca approached. "Aurora's been positioned by the keeper entrance since dawn. It's like she knew you were coming back." Rebecca pulled out the wooden whistle and blew it gently. Immediately, Aurora's ears perked up, and she rose to her full height, releasing an excited huffing sound that made several nearby visitors gasp in delight. "Good morning, beautiful," Rebecca called, her earlier unease momentarily forgotten as she entered the keeper area. Aurora pressed against the safety barrier, her nose working furiously to catch Rebecca's scent. "We've prepared a special breakfast for her," Marcus said, gesturing to a cart filled with fresh fruits, fish, and honey, all of Aurora's favorites. "Thought you might want to feed her yourself." Gratitude welled up in Rebecca's eyes. "Thank you." As she began offering pieces of apple and fish through the specially designed feeding hatch, Aurora's transformation continued to amaze everyone watching. The bear that had refused food for days now delicately accepted each morsel, her eyes never leaving Rebecca's face. "She remembers the training," Rebecca observed as Aurora responded to simple hand signals, sitting and offering her paw on command. "She was always so intelligent." "Intelligence isn't what I'm seeing," Dr. Reynolds remarked quietly. "What I'm seeing is trust, complete and absolute trust." The morning passed in a blur of activity. Rebecca worked with the keepers to enhance Aurora's habitat with new enrichment items, drawing on her knowledge of the bear's preferences. By midday, a crowd had gathered, many visitors having come specifically to witness the famous reunion after seeing it on the news. Among them was a slender woman with a camera, documenting Aurora's every move with professional precision. Unlike the other visitors, she showed little emotional reaction to the scene, her focus entirely on capturing images. Marcus noticed her first. "That woman has been here all morning," he murmured to Olivia. "Must be with the press." Olivia shrugged. Director Blackwood mentioned he'd approved some media access. As long as she stays behind the barriers, it's fine. But as the day progressed, Dr. Reynolds also noticed the photographer's unusual persistence. During a quiet moment when Rebecca stepped away to take a break, she approached the woman. "Excuse me," Dr. Reynolds said pleasantly. "Are you with one of the news outlets?" The woman lowered her camera, revealing sharp, intelligent eyes. "Dr. Isabella Mercer, behavioral zoologist. I'm documenting Aurora's case for a research paper." Dr. Reynolds frowned slightly. "I wasn't informed about any research project involving our animals." "It was arranged through your board of directors, Doctor," Mercer replied smoothly. "I believe Mr. Foster would have the details." She extended a business card. "Please, feel free to contact me if you have any questions about my work. I find Aurora's case particularly fascinating." Before Dr. Reynolds could respond, a commotion near Aurora's enclosure drew her attention. Rebecca was rushing toward the habitat, alarm evident in her posture. "Something's wrong," she called out as Dr. Reynolds hurried to join her. "Aurora's behaving strangely." Indeed, the bear was pacing anxiously, making distressed vocalizations unlike anything they'd heard before. Not the mournful cries of previous days, but sharp, agitated sounds that suggested fear. "What happened?" Dr. Reynolds asked, scanning the enclosure for any obvious triggers. "I don't know," Rebecca replied, her face pale with concern. "She was fine when I left for my break. I just stepped away for 15 minutes." As they watched, Aurora became increasingly distressed, swatting at the air around her face and shaking her head violently. "It looks like she's reacting to something," Marcus observed, his brow furrowed with worry. "An irritant, maybe?" Dr. Reynolds' medical training kicked in. Could be an allergic reaction or something in her environment. She turned to Olivia. "Check the ventilation system. Make sure nothing unusual is being circulated into her habitat." Rebecca had already entered the keeper area, blowing her whistle in an attempt to calm Aurora. The bear acknowledged the sound with a glance, but continued her agitated behavior. "I need to get closer," Rebecca insisted, moving toward the interior access door that would allow her to enter Aurora's actual living space. Something strictly against protocol. "Rebecca, wait," Dr. Reynolds called, but she was already punching in the security code that Olivia had shared with her earlier. As Rebecca disappeared into the small anteroom that separated the keeper area from the main habitat, Dr. Reynolds noticed Dr. Mercer watching intently, her camera raised to capture every moment of the unfolding drama. Inside the habitat, Rebecca moved cautiously toward Aurora, speaking in low, soothing tones. "Easy, girl. What's wrong? Let me help you." Aurora whimpered, rubbing her face against the ground, then against a rock, as if trying to remove something irritating. When she looked up at Rebecca, her eyes appeared reddened and watery. Understanding dawned on Rebecca. "Something's irritating her eyes and nose," she called back to Dr. Reynolds. "It's like she's been pepper sprayed." Dr. Reynolds immediately began scanning the habitat perimeter, looking for any signs of tampering or foreign substances. Marcus joined her, examining the misting system that occasionally activated to cool the habitat. "Here," Marcus said suddenly, pointing to a small, almost imperceptible device attached to one of the misters. "This doesn't belong." Dr. Reynolds examined it without touching. "It looks like it could disperse a substance into the mist." Her expression hardened. This was deliberate. Inside the habitat, Rebecca had managed to guide Aurora to the small pool in her enclosure. "Wash your face, girl," she encouraged. demonstrating by splashing water with her own hands. Remarkably, Aurora understood, dipping her face into the water and rubbing it with her paw. The cool water seemed to provide some relief, and her distress began to subside. As the situation stabilized, Dr. Reynolds turned to find Dr. Mercer gone, her spot in the crowd now empty. Something about the timing raised alarm bells in her mind, but before she could process the thought, Rebecca emerged from the habitat, soaking wet but triumphant. "She's calmer now," Rebecca reported, accepting the towel Olivia offered. "But we need to clean that pool and check the entire habitat for anything else that might harm her." Dr. Reynolds nodded grimly, holding up the small device Marcus had discovered. "I think you're right, and I don't think this was an accident." As they spoke, Kenneth Blackwood approached, his face flushed with anger. "What the hell happened here? I've got visitors reporting a bear in distress and an unauthorized person in the enclosure." "Someone planted this in Aurora's habitat," Dr. Reynolds explained, showing him the device. "It appears to have released an irritant that caused her significant discomfort." Blackwood's expression shifted from anger to concern. "Sabotage? That's a serious accusation." "I know what I saw," Marcus insisted. "That device wasn't there during morning checks." Rebecca, still drying her hair with the towel, added, "And I met someone earlier who seemed very interested in taking Aurora away from here. A board member named Foster." Blackwood's brow furrowed. Cameron Foster is a respected philanthropist who's donated millions to wildlife causes. What possible motive would he have? "I don't know," Rebecca admitted. "But he was pushing hard for Aurora to be transferred to some research facility, and he wasn't happy when I refused." Dr. Reynolds hesitated, then added, "There was also a woman here today claiming to be a behavioral zoologist. She said her research was approved by the board, specifically by Mr. Foster." Blackwood's frown deepened. "I've approved no such research." He pulled out his phone. "I need a description of this woman and any information she provided. And I want that device analyzed immediately. If someone is endangering our animals, I want to know who and why." As the director walked away, already barking orders into his phone, Rebecca turned to Dr. Reynolds. "I need to stay with Aurora tonight. After what just happened, I don't trust anyone else to watch over her." Dr. Reynolds nodded. "I'll arrange it. We'll set up a cot in the keeper area." She placed a reassuring hand on Rebecca's shoulder. "We'll get to the bottom of this, Rebecca. I promise." As the day's final visitors were ushered toward the exits, Rebecca returned to Aurora's enclosure. The bear had calmed considerably, but remained closer to the keeper entrance than usual, as if unwilling to let Rebecca out of her sight again. Rebecca settled on a bench near the safety barrier, pulling out her phone to check the time. As she did, a text message from an unknown number appeared on her screen. "Aurora was never meant for a life in captivity. Neither were you. We can help you both. Meet me at the East Service entrance at midnight if you want the truth about Northridge." Rebecca stared at the message, her heart pounding. Who could have sent this? How did they get her number? And most unsettling of all, what truth about Northridge could possibly justify endangering Aurora? As twilight descended over the zoo once more, Rebecca found herself caught in what felt increasingly like a dangerous game, one where Aurora was both pawn and prize. But unlike a game, the stakes here were terrifyingly real. Someone wanted Aurora badly enough to hurt her, and Rebecca was determined to find out why, even if it meant walking into what could very well be a trap. She glanced at Aurora, now sleeping peacefully near the barrier, the green blanket tucked close to her massive body. "I won't let anyone hurt you again," she whispered. "Whatever it takes, I'll keep you safe." What Rebecca couldn't know was that the events set in motion by her reunion with Aurora were far larger and more complex than she could imagine, reaching back years into the past and involving powers that would stop at nothing to achieve their goals. As night fell over Pinewood Zoo, forces were gathering, all focused on one seemingly simple question. What made the bond between this woman and this bear so special? And more importantly, how could it be replicated? The zoo had fallen silent, the last of the maintenance staff having departed hours ago. Only the occasional calls of nocturnal animals and the steady footsteps of the night security guard Walter broke the stillness. Rebecca sat on her cot in the small staff room adjacent to Aurora's enclosure, staring at the mysterious text message for what felt like the 100th time. Meet me at the East Service entrance at midnight if you want the truth about Northridge. The digital clock on the wall read 11:42 p.m. Rebecca had less than 20 minutes to decide whether to keep this mysterious rendezvous. Common sense told her to delete the message and inform Dr. Reynolds immediately, but something deeper, an instinct she couldn't quite name, pushed her toward action. Rising quietly, she checked on Aurora through the observation window. The bear slept peacefully, her massive form rising and falling with each breath. Rebecca had spent the evening continuing their reacquaintance, feeding Aurora by hand and speaking softly to her for hours. The bear's eyes had followed her every movement, as if afraid Rebecca might vanish again if she looked away. "I'll be back soon," Rebecca whispered, though the glass prevented Aurora from hearing her. "I promise." Slipping on her jacket, Rebecca made her way through the dimly lit corridor that led to the main keeper area. She had memorized the night patrol schedule Walter had casually mentioned during his evening check-in. At midnight, he would be on the opposite side of the zoo, giving her a narrow window to meet this mysterious informant and return undetected. The East Service entrance was used primarily for deliveries and waste removal, a utilitarian concrete tunnel that connected the zoo's operational areas to the outside world. As Rebecca approached, her footsteps echoing softly against the walls, she felt a flutter of apprehension in her stomach. She pulled out her phone, finger hovering over Dr. Reynolds' contact information, ready to call for help if necessary. The service door was unlocked, the first red flag. It should have been secured at all times after hours. Pushing it open cautiously, Rebecca peered into the darkness beyond. A figure stood in the shadows, barely visible in the amber glow of a distant security light. Ms. Morgan. The voice was female, quiet but assured. "Thank you for coming." The woman stepped forward, revealing herself to be Dr. Isabella Mercer, the photographer from earlier that day. She was dressed differently now. Practical dark clothing had replaced her casual tourist attire, and her camera was nowhere to be seen. "You?" Rebecca said, immediately tensing. "You were there when Aurora was attacked." Dr. Mercer's expression remained neutral. "I was documenting, not participating. There's a difference." She gestured to a nearby maintenance vehicle. "We should talk somewhere less exposed. I have information about Aurora and Northridge that you need to hear." Rebecca stood her ground. "I'm not going anywhere with you until you tell me who you really are and what you want with my bear." A hint of approval flashed across Mercer's face. "Your loyalty is commendable." "Very well." She reached slowly into her pocket and produced an identification card. "I'm Dr. Isabella Mercer, lead researcher for Project Ursus at the Institute for Interspecies Intelligence. And contrary to what you might believe, I'm here to help both you and Aurora." Rebecca examined the ID. It appeared legitimate, with official government security features and a logo she vaguely recognized from scientific journals. "What's Project Ursus? And what does it have to do with Aurora?" Project Ursus studies cognitive development and emotional bonding in bears, particularly those raised with significant human contact. Mercer glanced around, clearly uncomfortable with their exposed position. Aurora is special, Miss Morgan. Her capacity for emotional connection exceeds anything we've documented in other rehabilitated bears. We believe it's linked to the circumstances of her rescue and your specific caregiving methods. Rebecca frowned. So you're saying the Wildlife Conservation Foundation and this institute are the same organization? No, Mercer replied, her expression hardening. The foundation is a front for private interest with less ethical research goals. I've been tracking their activities for nearly 2 years. Before Rebecca could respond, a distant door slammed, the sound echoing through the service corridor. Mercer tensed. We need to move. Now. This time, Rebecca didn't argue. She followed Mercer to the maintenance vehicle and they slipped inside. Rather than starting the engine, Mercer reached under the dashboard and pulled out a thin metal case. Northridge Wildlife Sanctuary didn't close due to lack of funding, she said, opening the case to reveal a collection of documents. It was strategically dismantled to acquire specific animals for research. Rebecca stared at her in disbelief. That's absurd. I worked there for 5 years. Our financial struggles were very real. The financial struggles were manufactured, Mercer countered, handing Rebecca a document. Your primary benefactor, Harrison Wells, didn't die of natural causes. His death was arranged after he began asking questions about where certain rehabilitated animals were being transferred. Rebecca's hands trembled as she examined the document, an internal memo detailing the acquisition targets at Northridge. Aurora's name was circled in red, along with those of several other animals, all with notations regarding their unusual bonds with specific caretakers. This can't be real, Rebecca whispered, though a sinking feeling in her stomach suggested otherwise. Why would anyone go to such lengths? Mercer's expression was grim. Because animals with heightened emotional intelligence and human bonding capabilities have immense research value, both for legitimate scientific advancement and for less savory applications. What kind of applications? Military primarily. Animals that can form deep bonds with handlers can be trained for specialized tasks. Bears, with their incredible strength, intelligence, and sensory capabilities, are particularly valuable. Mercer pulled out another document, this one containing photographs of facilities with caged bears. The Foundation has been conditioning these animals using experimental methods, attempting to replicate naturally occurring bonds like the one between you and Aurora. Rebecca felt sick. And Cameron Foster? He's part of this? Foster is their acquisition specialist. He identifies potential research subjects and facilitates their transfer into Foundation control. Mercer's voice lowered. He's been after Aurora since she first showed signs of advanced emotional intelligence at Northridge. When you unexpectedly showed up yesterday, it accelerated their timeline. The irritant in her habitat, Rebecca realized. They were trying to create a situation where Aurora would seem dangerous or unstable. Mercer nodded, giving them justification to recommend her immediate transfer to a specialized facility for evaluation. Rebecca's mind raced, connecting pieces of a puzzle she hadn't known existed until now. But why contact me? Why are you telling me all this? For the first time, Mercer's professional demeanor cracked slightly, revealing something more human underneath. Because I've seen what happens to these animals in Foundation facilities. No creature deserves that fate. She hesitated. And because Aurora isn't the only one they're interested in. Your methods, Miss Morgan, your ability to form this extraordinary connection, That's equally valuable to them. A chill ran down Rebecca's spine. Are you saying I'm in danger too? I'm saying you need to be extremely careful. Mercer gathered the documents, returning them to the case. Foster will make another attempt to separate you and Aurora. When he does, you need to be prepared. Prepared how? I should go to the police with this information. With what evidence? Unverifiable documents from a stranger? Mercer shook her head. Foster has connections throughout law enforcement and wildlife management agencies. You'd be discredited before you could finish filing a report. Then what am I supposed to do? Rebecca demanded, frustration bleeding into her voice. Continue working with Aurora. Document everything. Build allies within the zoo. And that veterinarian, Dr. Reynolds, seems trustworthy. Mercer pulled out a small device resembling a flash drive. This contains everything I've collected on the Foundation and Project Ursus, including evidence linking Foster to illegal animal trafficking. Keep it hidden. Rebecca accepted the drive reluctantly. How do I know I can trust you? This could all be elaborate manipulation. A hint of a smile touched Mercer's lips. You don't. But ask yourself this. Who benefits from warning you? If I worked for the Foundation, I'd be helping Foster separate you from Aurora, not providing information to keep you together. It was a valid point, Rebecca had to admit. Before she could respond further, her phone vibrated with an incoming call. Dr. Reynolds' name flashed on the screen. I need to take this, Rebecca said, answering the call. Hello? Rebecca? Dr. Reynolds sounded frantic. Where are you? Aurora's awake and extremely agitated. She's looking for you. I'm on my way, Rebecca replied, already opening the vehicle door. Tell her I'm coming. As she ended the call, Mercer caught her arm. Be careful who you share this information with. I'll contact you again when it's safe. She glanced at her watch. Take the north corridor back to the bear habitat. The security guard just started his rounds on the south side. Rebecca nodded, clutching the flash drive tightly. Thank you, I think. Don't thank me yet, Mercer replied grimly. This is just the beginning. As Rebecca hurried back through the service entrance, questions swirled in her mind. Could Mercer be trusted? Was this elaborate story about scientific conspiracies and military applications just paranoid fantasy? Yet the documents had seemed legitimate, and they explained too many inconsistencies to be dismissed entirely. When she reached Aurora's habitat, the bear was indeed awake, pacing anxiously near the keeper entrance. The moment Rebecca appeared, Aurora released a low, worried vocalization, pressing against the barrier as if trying to verify Rebecca's well-being. I'm here, girl, Rebecca soothed, reaching through the feeding hatch to stroke the bear's thick fur. I'm not going anywhere. As Aurora gradually settled, Rebecca noticed a figure watching from the shadows near the reptile house. For a moment, she thought it might be Mercer again, but as the figure stepped briefly into a pool of light, Rebecca recognized the distinctive silhouette of Cameron Foster. He stood observing them for several seconds before melting back into the darkness, his purpose unknown, but undeniably unsettling. Rebecca clutched the flash drive in her pocket, suddenly grateful for Mercer's warning. Whatever game was being played here, the stakes were clearly higher than she had imagined. And Aurora, innocent and trusting, was caught in the middle. Dawn broke over Pinewood Zoo with a chorus of animal calls and the distant rumble of delivery trucks. Rebecca had barely slept, splitting her night between keeping watch over Aurora and examining the contents of Mercer's flash drive on her phone. The information was as disturbing as it was comprehensive. Detailed records of animal acquisitions, research protocols that bordered on cruelty, and financial transactions linking the Wildlife Conservation Foundation to military contractors. Most disturbing of all were the profiles of handlers, individuals like Rebecca, who had demonstrated unusual success in bonding with specific animals. The Foundation had been tracking these people for years, studying their techniques and, in some cases, recruiting them through various means, from lucrative job offers to outright coercion. Rebecca's own file contained information that only someone with intimate knowledge of her work at Northridge could have compiled, including psychological assessments and detailed observations of her interactions with Aurora. The final entry, dated just 2 days ago, chilled her to the bone. Subject has made contact with Asset A7, Aurora. Proceed with Acquisition Protocol 3. A soft knock at the staff room door startled Rebecca from her thoughts. She quickly closed the files and pocketed her phone as Dr. Reynolds entered, carrying 2 cups of coffee. "You look like you could use this," the veterinarian said, offering one of the cups. "Rough night?" Rebecca accepted the coffee gratefully. Aurora was restless. I think yesterday's incident upset her more than we realized. Dr. Reynolds nodded, taking a seat on the edge of the desk. The lab results came back on that device Marcus found. It contained capsaicin, essentially a mild pepper spray, enough to cause discomfort but not permanent damage. She studied Rebecca's face. "The police are investigating, but without security footage of that area, there's not much to go on." "No security cameras?" Rebecca asked, surprised. That particular misting unit was in the only blind spot in Aurora's enclosure. Someone knew exactly where to place it. Dr. Reynolds' expression turned serious. "Rebecca, I don't want to alarm you, but this was clearly targeted. Director Blackwood has authorized additional security measures, including a guard stationed near Aurora's habitat at all times." Rebecca nodded, weighing how much to share about her midnight meeting. She liked Dr. Reynolds and wanted to trust her, but Mercer's warnings about Foster's connections left her hesitant to reveal everything. "There's something else bothering you," Dr. Reynolds observed, her perceptive gaze making Rebecca shift uncomfortably. "Something you're not telling me." Before Rebecca could respond, the staff room door opened again, and Olivia burst in, her usual composed demeanor replaced by evident excitement. "You're not going to believe this," she exclaimed. "There's a film crew setting up by Aurora's enclosure. Apparently, the zoos approved a documentary about your reunion." Dr. Reynolds frowned. "That's the first I've heard of it. Who authorized this?" "Director Blackwood announced it this morning, said it was a fantastic opportunity for publicity." Olivia glanced at her watch. "They want to start filming in an hour, something about capturing the morning feeding session." Rebecca and Dr. Reynolds exchanged concerned glances. This sudden development felt too convenient, especially in light of Mercer's warnings about the Foundation's interest in documenting Aurora's behavior. "Did Blackwood mention who's producing this documentary?" Rebecca asked, trying to keep her voice casual. Olivia nodded. "Some wildlife film company. Wildlife Visions, I think? They've done stuff for National Geographic." "Wildlife Visions is a subsidiary of the Wildlife Conservation Foundation," Dr. Reynolds said slowly, her eyes narrowing. "I reviewed their proposal for educational materials last month." The implication hung in the air between them. Rebecca's suspicions about Foster's involvement seemed increasingly justified. "We should speak with Director Blackwood," Dr. Reynolds decided, standing abruptly. "This is moving too quickly." As they made their way toward the administrative building, Rebecca noticed the film crew already setting up elaborate equipment around Aurora's habitat. A sleek-looking man with the director's headset was gesturing animatedly, pointing to various angles of the enclosure. What caught Rebecca's attention, however, was the woman standing slightly apart from the crew, making notes on a tablet, Dr. Isabella Mercer. Their eyes met briefly across the distance, and Mercer gave an almost imperceptible nod before turning away to speak with a crew member. The administrative building was a flurry of activity, with staff preparing for what appeared to be a major media event. Kenneth Blackwood stood in the center of it all, looking more animated than Rebecca had seen him before. "Ah, Dr. Reynolds and Ms. Morgan. Perfect timing," he greeted them enthusiastically. "The documentary team is very eager to begin. This exposure could be tremendous for our conservation efforts." "Director, I'm concerned about the timing," Dr. Reynolds began carefully. "Aurora is still adjusting to Rebecca's presence. Adding the stress of a film crew might set back her progress." Blackwood waved a dismissive hand. "They've assured me they'll be unobtrusive. State-of-the-art equipment, minimal human presence. Besides, this is a unique opportunity to document animal cognition and emotional bonding. Exactly the kind of research you've been advocating for." "I understand that, Doctor." Reynolds persisted. "But I would have appreciated being consulted before this was approved." "It all happened rather quickly," Blackwood admitted. "Mr. Foster brought the proposal to me late last night. Given the public interest in Aurora's story, it seemed foolish to delay." Of course, Foster was involved. Rebecca exchanged a meaningful glance with Dr. Reynolds. "Director," Rebecca said, deciding to take a direct approach. "Has anyone verified the credentials of this film crew? I have some concerns about their true purpose here." Blackwood's enthusiasm dimmed slightly. "Ms. Morgan, while I appreciate your concern for Aurora, these are professionals with an outstanding reputation in wildlife documentation. Mr. Foster personally vouched for them." "And where is Mr. Foster now?" Dr. Reynolds asked. "He'll be joining us later for the formal announcement to the press." Blackwood checked his watch. "Which reminds me, we should prepare Aurora for her morning feeding. The crew wants to capture your interaction with her, Ms. Morgan. It's the centerpiece of their documentary." Rebecca felt trapped. Refusing to participate would seem suspicious and might give Foster reason to question her continued presence, but agreeing meant potentially exposing Aurora to whatever hidden agenda the Foundation might have. "I'd like to check the filming setup first," she said finally, "to make sure it won't distress Aurora." Of course," Blackwood agreed readily. "The crew director can walk you through everything. His name is Julian Hayes, quite renowned in wildlife filmmaking." As they left the administrative building, Dr. Reynolds pulled Rebecca aside. "Something doesn't feel right about this. The timing is too convenient." "I know," Rebecca agreed quietly. "But if I refuse to participate, they might use it as an excuse to restrict my access to Aurora." Dr. Reynolds nodded grimly. "Just be careful. I'll try to find out more about this Wildlife Visions company and their connection to Foster." She hesitated, then added, "Rebecca, if there's something else you know, something that might help us understand what's happening here, now would be the time to share it." Rebecca thought of Mercer's flash drive, heavy in her pocket. Could she trust Dr. Reynolds with that information? Before she could decide, a polished voice interrupted them. "Miss Morgan, Dr. Reynolds, I'm Julian Hayes, Creative Director for Wildlife Visions." The man approaching them was tall and elegantly dressed, with the confident air of someone accustomed to being in charge. "I cannot tell you how excited we are to document your extraordinary relationship with Aurora. It's precisely the kind of emotional storytelling that connects viewers to wildlife conservation efforts." His enthusiasm seemed genuine, but Rebecca noticed how his eyes assessed them both, calculating rather than warm. He reminded her of Foster in that regard, the same polished veneer concealing something harder underneath. "Mr. Hayes," she acknowledged cautiously, "I'd like to review your filming plans before we begin. Aurora's welfare is my primary concern." Of course," Hayes agreed smoothly. "Animal welfare is our paramount consideration as well. If you'll follow me, I can show you our setup and explain exactly how we'll be proceeding." As Hayes led them toward Aurora's habitat, Rebecca caught sight of Mercer again, now apparently directing the placement of sound equipment. Their eyes met briefly, and Mercer made a subtle gesture toward Hayes, followed by a warning shake of her head. The message was clear: don't trust him. The filming equipment surrounding Aurora's enclosure was far more extensive than Rebecca had anticipated. Multiple camera positions, directional microphones, and what appeared to be specialized sensors attached to discrete locations around the habitat. "What are those?" Rebecca asked, pointing to one of the small devices affixed to the artificial rock formation. "Thermal imaging sensors," Hayes explained without hesitation. "They help us capture Aurora's physiological responses during emotional moments. A rise in body temperature around the eyes, for instance, can indicate psychological engagement. It's completely non-invasive." It sounded plausible, but something about the configuration struck Rebecca as odd. Before she could question it further, Aurora noticed her presence and immediately approached the glass, making the soft huffing sound that had become her greeting. "There she is," Hayes said, his voice suddenly hushed with what seemed like genuine awe. "Magnificent creature, and clearly bonded to you in a remarkable way." Despite her suspicions, Rebecca couldn't help but smile at Aurora's obvious pleasure in seeing her. "Good morning, beautiful," she called, approaching the glass. Hayes gestured to a cameraman, who immediately began filming the interaction. "Just pretend we're not here," Hayes instructed. "Act naturally. We want to capture the authentic connection between you." Over the next hour, Rebecca went through Aurora's morning routine: feeding, basic training exercises, and enrichment activities, all under the watchful eyes of the cameras. Aurora seemed largely unconcerned by the additional people, focused entirely on Rebecca and the tasks at hand. What Rebecca found most disturbing, however, was the way Hayes directed his crew to capture specific moments. Aurora's eyes when Rebecca called her name, the bear's physical responses to different vocal tones, her reactions when Rebecca momentarily stepped out. It felt less like documentary filmmaking and more like a scientific study of their bond. During a short break, Rebecca managed to position herself near Mercer, who was adjusting a microphone stand. "What's really going on here?" Rebecca murmured, pretending to examine the enrichment toys they'd be using next. Mercer didn't look up from her task. "They're not just filming. They're collecting data on your bonding mechanisms, voice patterns, pheromone responses, subliminal cues you may not even be aware you're giving." Her voice was barely audible. "Hayes isn't a filmmaker. He's a behavioral psychologist specializing in operant conditioning." Rebecca felt a chill run through her. "Why? What are they planning to do with this information?" "Replicate it," Mercer replied simply. "Create training protocols that can forge similar bonds with other animals, but with handlers loyal to the Foundation." Before Rebecca could ask anything else, Hayes approached, his charming smile firmly in place. "Ready for the next segment? We'd like to capture some of the vocalization responses you mentioned. The way Aurora answers specific sounds you make." Rebecca nodded, forcing a smile of her own. "Of course." As the morning progressed, Rebecca became increasingly convinced that Mercer's assessment was correct. This wasn't a documentary. It was a research study disguised as filmmaking. Every interaction with Aurora was meticulously recorded, with Hayes occasionally requesting specific repetitions of gestures or vocalizations that elicited strong responses from the bear. By lunchtime, Rebecca was exhausted from the tension of maintaining her facade of cooperation while trying to protect Aurora from whatever the crew's true intentions might be. When Hayes finally called for a break, announcing they'd resume filming in the afternoon, Rebecca nearly sagged with relief. Dr. Reynolds, who had been observing from a distance, immediately approached. "How are you holding up?" "Fine," Rebecca replied automatically, though the strain was evident in her voice. "Aurora seems unfazed by it all, at least." "Director Blackwood is pleased with how it's going," Dr. Reynolds said quietly. "He's already talking about extending the filming schedule to a full week." A week of this scrutiny would be unbearable, Rebecca thought, but she merely nodded. "Has there been any news about yesterday's incident? The capsaicin device?" Dr. Reynolds glanced around before responding, lowering her voice. "Security found something interesting on the zoo's perimeter cameras. Someone disabled the specific camera covering Aurora's habitat during the exact time frame when the device must have been planted." "An inside job?" Rebecca suggested. "That's what it looks like. Only staff would know the camera locations and schedules." Dr. Reynolds hesitated. "Rebecca, I've been doing some research on the Wildlife Conservation Foundation. Their public conservation work seems legitimate, but there are rumors about classified research contracts with military applications." Rebecca felt a surge of hope. Perhaps Dr. Reynolds could be trusted after all. "Eleanor," she said, using the veterinarian's first name for the first time, "I need to show you something. Not here, though." Dr. Reynolds nodded in understanding. "My office, after the afternoon filming session. We should—" She broke off as Cameron Foster approached, immaculately dressed as always, and wearing an expression of cordial interest. "Ladies," he greeted them. "I've just been reviewing some of the morning's footage. Truly remarkable work, Miss Morgan. Your connection with Aurora is even more impressive than I anticipated." "Thank you," Rebecca replied stiffly, "though I'm still unclear on why this documentary needed to happen so suddenly." Foster's smile didn't waver. "Opportunity waits for no one in the media world, Miss Morgan. Your story has captured public imagination. Striking while the iron is hot is simply good business." "And is that all this is to you?" "Business?" Rebecca challenged, unable to maintain her pretense of cooperation. Something shifted in Foster's eyes, a brief, calculating assessment before the pleasant mask returned. "Conservation is always a blend of idealism and pragmatism. Documentaries like this generate funding and public support for wildlife protection efforts. Surely you can appreciate that." Before Rebecca could respond, a commotion erupted from the direction of Aurora's habitat. Alarmed shouts and the sound of a deep, distressed growl cut through the air. "Aurora!" Rebecca gasped, already running toward the enclosure. The scene that greeted her sent ice through her veins. Aurora was pacing agitatedly, making threatening vocalizations unlike anything Rebecca had heard from her before. Several film crew members had backed away from the glass, their equipment abandoned. Only Hayes remained close, watching the bear's behavior with intense focus. "What happened?" Rebecca demanded, pushing past a retreating crew member. "No idea," one of them replied shakily. She was calm 1 minute, then suddenly became aggressive. Rebecca approached the glass cautiously, assessing Aurora's behavior. The bear's pupils were dilated, her movements jerky and panicked rather than truly aggressive. This wasn't anger. It was fear. "Aurora," she called softly. "What's wrong, girl?" The bear's head swung toward her voice, but her usual recognition seemed delayed. She shook her head violently, as if trying to clear it, then released another distressed vocalization. "Something's wrong," Rebecca said urgently to Dr. Reynolds, who had arrived behind her. "This isn't normal behavior. Even for a stressed bear, it's like she's disoriented." Dr. Reynolds was already examining the habitat with sharp, professional eyes. "Did anyone enter the enclosure during the break? Add anything to her food or water?" The crew members shook their heads, but Rebecca noticed Hayes watching Aurora with an expression that seemed more like clinical interest than concern. "Mr. Hayes," she said sharply, "did your equipment do something to her?" Hayes appeared genuinely startled by the accusation. "Our equipment is completely passive. It records. It doesn't emit anything that could affect an animal." But Rebecca wasn't convinced. She scanned the habitat, looking for anything unusual. The thermal sensors Hayes had identified earlier caught her attention. Their positioning now struck her as strategic rather than random, creating a pattern around the areas where Aurora spent most of her time. "Those aren't just sensors, are they?" she accused, turning to Hayes. "What are they really doing to her?" Before Hayes could answer, Foster stepped forward, his manner authoritative. "I think we need to consider Aurora's welfare here. If she's becoming unstable, we may need to sedate her and have her examined." "She's not unstable," Rebecca insisted. "Something is causing this behavior." As if to punctuate her words, Aurora suddenly collapsed onto her side, her massive body convulsing in what looked disturbingly like a seizure. "Aurora!" Rebecca cried, moving toward the keeper entrance without hesitation. Dr. Reynolds was already on her radio, calling for the emergency response team. "Possible medical emergency in the bear habitat. I need the tranquilizer kit and medical support, now." Foster stepped in front of Rebecca, blocking her path. "Miss Morgan, you can't go in there. She's clearly not herself. It's too dangerous." "Get out of my way," Rebecca said, her voice deadly calm. "That bear is having a seizure, and I'm going to help her. Security will handle it," Foster insisted. This is precisely why the Foundation's specialized facility would be better equipped for Aurora's care. They have veterinary staff trained specifically for neurological issues in large predators. The pieces suddenly clicked into place for Rebecca. "You did this," she whispered, horror and rage building inside her. "You're causing these incidents to justify taking her away." Foster's expression hardened. "That's a serious and unfounded accusation, Miss Morgan. I suggest you focus on Aurora's immediate welfare rather than conspiracy theories." The zoo's emergency response team arrived, led by a grim-faced senior keeper carrying a tranquilizer rifle. Dr. Reynolds quickly briefed them on Aurora's symptoms as they prepared to enter the habitat. "Wait," Rebecca called out, her eyes fixed on one of Hayes's sensors visible through the glass. "Before you tranquilize her, remove those devices from her enclosure. All of them." The keeper with the rifle hesitated, looking to Dr. Reynolds for guidance. "Do it," Dr. Reynolds decided after a moment's consideration. "If there's any chance they're contributing to her distress, they need to go." Foster stepped forward, his composure slightly cracked. "Those are expensive pieces of scientific equipment. You have no authority to remove them." "Actually, I do," Dr. Reynolds countered, her professional authority evident in her tone. "As head veterinarian, I have final say in any situation involving animal welfare. And right now, those devices are my primary suspects in Aurora's sudden neurological symptoms." She nodded to the emergency team who entered the habitat cautiously, giving the still convulsing Aurora a wide berth as they began systematically removing the suspicious devices. Hayes moved closer to Foster, speaking in urgent, hushed tones. Rebecca couldn't hear their conversation, but their body language suggested disagreement, with Hayes appearing increasingly agitated. As the last device was removed, something remarkable happened. Aurora's convulsions gradually subsided, her breathing steadied, and though she remained on her side, her eyes began to clear. The devices were affecting her, Dr. Reynolds confirmed, her expression a mixture of relief and anger. Some kind of neurological disruption. Rebecca pushed past Foster, who seemed momentarily too shocked to stop her, and entered the habitat alongside Dr. Reynolds. They approached Aurora cautiously, Rebecca speaking in soft, soothing tones. "Easy, girl. You're okay now. They're gone." Aurora's eyes focused on Rebecca, recognition returning. She made a weak, huffing sound, a pale version of her usual greeting, and attempted to raise her head. "Stay still," Rebecca encouraged, kneeling beside the massive bear with no apparent fear. "Just rest." Dr. Reynolds conducted a quick field assessment, checking Aurora's pupillary response and monitoring her breathing. "Her vital signs are stabilizing, but she needs a full workup. We should move her to the veterinary facility as soon as she's strong enough to walk." Behind them, a commotion broke out as Director Blackwood arrived, demanding explanations. Rebecca could hear Foster's smooth voice offering a sanitized version of events, presenting the incident as evidence of Aurora's unstable condition rather than the result of outside interference. "This is exactly why specialized care is essential," Foster was saying. "Bears with neurological issues can become unpredictable and dangerous." "The only danger here came from your equipment," Rebecca called out, unable to contain her anger any longer. She gestured to the devices the emergency team had collected. These were causing her seizures. They stopped the moment these were removed. Blackwood looked between Foster and Rebecca, confusion evident on his face. "What equipment?" "I thought this was standard filming gear." "So did we all," Dr. Reynolds said grimly, joining the conversation while continuing to monitor Aurora. "But these devices appear to be emitting something that caused severe neurological distress in Aurora. I'm having them analyzed immediately." Foster's composure faltered only slightly. "Director Blackwood, these are highly sensitive instruments designed to capture subtle biological data. There must be some other explanation for the bear's episode." "Like what?" Rebecca challenged. "She was perfectly fine until your crew installed those devices. She improved the moment they were removed. That's not coincidence." Blackwood's expression hardened as he processed this information. "Mr. Foster, I authorized documentary filming, not experimental equipment installation. If these devices harmed our animal, there will be serious consequences." "I assure you, that was never our intention," Foster replied smoothly, though Rebecca noticed Hayes beginning to edge toward the exit, apparently unwilling to be part of the fallout. "However, this incident does highlight the specialized care Aurora requires. The Wildlife Conservation Foundation's research facility is equipped with—" "She's not going anywhere," Rebecca interrupted firmly, "especially not to a facility connected to people who just caused her to have seizures." The tension in the air was palpable as Foster and Rebecca faced off, with Blackwood and Dr. Reynolds watching closely. The standoff might have continued indefinitely if not for a new arrival, Dr. Isabella Mercer, who approached with purposeful strides. "Director Blackwood," she said, her professional demeanor firmly in place. "I believe I can offer some clarity on this situation." Foster's expression flickered with something like alarm. "Dr. Mercer, this isn't the appropriate forum for—" "I am Dr. Isabella Mercer," she continued, ignoring Foster, "senior investigator for the Federal Wildlife Protection Agency. I've been conducting an undercover investigation into the Wildlife Conservation Foundation for the past 18 months. She produced an official identification badge that left no doubt about her authority. The devices installed in Aurora's habitat were not standard recording equipment, but experimental neurological disruptors designed to induce stress responses in animals. She nodded toward Hayes, who had frozen near the exit. Dr. Julian Hayes is not a filmmaker, but a behavioral conditioning specialist who has been implicated in several cases of illegal animal experimentation. Foster's composed facade cracked completely. These are outrageous claims. Director Blackwood, I assure you. Save it, Foster. Mercer cut him off coldly. We have your communications with military contractors, documentation of illegal animal acquisition, and now physical evidence of harmful experimental equipment. Federal agents are currently securing the zoo perimeter and detaining the rest of your team. As if on cue, several uniformed officers appeared at the habitat entrance. Foster's eyes darted between them and Mercer, calculating his options. In a sudden movement, he shoved past Blackwood and bolted toward a service exit. "Stop him!" Mercer shouted, but Foster was already disappearing through the door. Two agents pursued him while the others secured Hayes, who had surrendered without resistance. Mercer turned to Blackwood, whose face reflected shock and betrayal. "Director, I apologize for the disruption to your facility. We had hoped to apprehend Foster and his team without incident, but Aurora's unexpected reaction to their equipment forced our hand." Blackwood seemed to age years in moments. "My zoo. I allowed this to happen. I trusted him." "Foster is exceptionally skilled at manipulation," Mercer assured him. "He's infiltrated numerous wildlife facilities over the years. That's why we've been tracking him for so long." Dr. Reynolds, still monitoring Aurora, called out, "Her condition is stabilizing, but she needs proper medical attention. We should move her to the veterinary center." Rebecca hadn't left Aurora's side, stroking the bear's thick fur and murmuring reassurances. The massive animal had managed to sit up, though she still appeared disoriented. Her eyes remained fixed on Rebecca, drawing strength from her presence. "Can she walk?" Mercer asked, approaching cautiously. Rebecca nodded. "I think so, with support." She looked up at Mercer, gratitude and lingering suspicion mingling in her expression. "You were telling the truth all along." "Not the whole truth," Mercer admitted. "But the essential parts, yes." With careful coaxing from Rebecca, Aurora managed to stand, leaning heavily against her as they slowly made their way toward the veterinary facility. Zoo staff cleared paths and secured areas to ensure their safe passage, while curious visitors were kept at a distance by security. The veterinary center was state-of-the-art, equipped to handle everything from routine checkups to major surgeries. Aurora was settled into the largest examination area, still clinging to Rebecca's side. "I need to conduct a thorough assessment, Doctor," Reynolds explained, preparing various instruments. The neurological effects of those devices could have lasting implications. Rebecca nodded, maintaining physical contact with Aurora throughout the examination. The bear remained remarkably cooperative, as if understanding that these uncomfortable procedures were meant to help her. Outside, the situation continued to unfold dramatically. Reports came in that Foster had been apprehended trying to leave the zoo grounds in a maintenance vehicle. The remaining film crew members were in custody, and the devices removed from Aurora's habitat had been secured as evidence. After several hours of tests, blood work, and observation, Dr. Reynolds finally delivered her assessment. Remarkably, there doesn't appear to be any permanent damage. Her neurological responses are returning to normal, and her blood work shows no concerning abnormalities. The relief in the room was palpable. Rebecca pressed her forehead against Aurora's massive head, whispering words only the bear could hear. Aurora responded with a soft, contented rumble. "What happens now?" Rebecca asked, looking up at Mercer, who had remained throughout the ordeal. "Foster and his associates will face multiple federal charges: animal cruelty, fraud, conspiracy, and likely corporate espionage." Mercer stepped closer, her professional demeanor softening slightly. "As for Aurora, that's partly up to you. Me? The Foundation targeted her because of your unique bond. They wanted to understand it, replicate it for their own purposes." Mercer's expression grew thoughtful. "But our agency has been studying similar human-animal connections from a conservation perspective. We believe these relationships could revolutionize wildlife rehabilitation and reintroduction programs." Rebecca looked at Aurora, who had drifted into an exhausted sleep, her massive head resting in Rebecca's lap. "What are you suggesting?" "A legitimate research partnership. You, Aurora, a team of ethical scientists working to understand and document your bond, not to exploit it, but to help other animals and conservationists." Director Blackwood, who had been quietly observing from the doorway, stepped forward. "Pinewood could host such a program. After what's happened, we owe it to Aurora, and to you, Ms. Morgan." Dr. Reynolds nodded enthusiastically. "We could establish a specialized research and rehabilitation center, not just for bears, but for all species that form these extraordinary bonds with humans." For the first time since the nightmare began, Rebecca felt a glimmer of hope. Aurora would stay here, safe? "With significantly enhanced security and oversight," Mercer confirmed. "And you would be offered a permanent position as her primary caretaker and research partner." The possibility of remaining with Aurora, of never having to leave her again, brought tears to Rebecca's eyes. She looked down at the sleeping bear, remembering the tiny burned cub she had nursed back to health all those years ago. The journey that had brought them both here had been filled with pain and separation, but perhaps it had led them exactly where they needed to be. 3 months later, the autumn air carried a crisp chill as Rebecca made her way along the newly constructed pathway that connected Aurora's expanded habitat to the research center named in her honor, the Aurora Institute for Interspecies Bonding. The facility had become Pinewood Zoo's crown jewel, drawing researchers, conservationists, and visitors from around the world. The habitat itself had been transformed, now 5 times its original size, and designed to mimic Aurora's natural environment, complete with a flowing stream, native vegetation, and complex enrichment features. Most importantly, it included a special area where Rebecca could safely interact with Aurora without barriers, a testament to the trust that had been established and the protocols they had developed together. As Rebecca approached the habitat's main viewing area, she could see a small crowd gathered, watching in awe as Aurora demonstrated her impressive problem-solving abilities. The bear was working on a complex puzzle box that Dr. Reynolds had designed, skillfully manipulating levers and sliding panels to access the honey hidden inside. "She solved it in half the time we expected," Marcus commented as Rebecca joined him at the observation point. The young keeper had become an invaluable part of the research team, his genuine care for Aurora earning him a special place in both Rebecca's and the bear's trust circle. "She's always been clever," Rebecca replied with the pride of a parent, "but she seems to be getting faster with each new challenge." The audience murmured appreciatively as Aurora finally accessed the honey, dipping her massive paw delicately into the sweet reward. A collective awe rose from the crowd when she looked up directly at Rebecca, making her signature huffing sound of greeting. "She knew you were here before she saw you," Marcus observed. "Dr. Mercer will want that noted in today's observation log." Rebecca nodded, her hand automatically reaching for the small recording device she now carried at all times. Aurora recognizes Rebecca's footsteps at approximately 70 meters distance, she dictated quietly. Vocalizes greeting before visual confirmation. These small observations had become the building blocks of their research, documenting the intricate ways in which Aurora and Rebecca communicated and connected. Dr. Mercer, now officially partnered with Pinewood as a research director, had established rigorous protocols for documenting these interactions, creating a growing database of insights into interspecies bonding. More impressive still were the applications already emerging from their work. 2 other zoos had implemented modified versions of Rebecca's bonding techniques with orphaned bear cubs, showing promising results. Wildlife rehabilitators were adapting the methods for other species, finding that animals connected to specific caretakers showed better adjustment rates when reintroduced to the wild. "Ms. Morgan?" A young woman approached, professional camera in hand. "I'm Zoe from National Wildlife Magazine. We're here for the authorized photo session." Rebecca smiled, recognizing the name from Dr. Reynolds' brief that morning. After the Foundation incident, Pinewood had implemented strict protocols for all media coverage, with Rebecca and Dr. Mercer personally approving each request. Of course, Aurora just finished her enrichment session, so her attention span might be limited, but we can try. The photographer followed Rebecca to the special interaction area, where a safety briefing was mandatory even for approved visitors. As they prepared to enter, Dr. Reynolds joined them, clipboard in hand. "Perfect timing," she greeted them. "I wanted to monitor Aurora's cortisol levels during the photo session. Our hypothesis is that her stress response is significantly reduced when you're present during new experiences, Rebecca." Over the past months, Dr. Reynolds had blossomed from competent veterinarian to pioneering researcher, her methodical approach and genuine care for the animals making her an essential part of the Institute's work. Inside the interaction space, Aurora immediately approached, her massive form moving with surprising grace. Despite her impressive size, nearly 800 pounds of muscle and fur, there was a gentleness in her movements when she was near Rebecca that visitors found astonishing. "Hello, beautiful," Rebecca greeted her, extending a hand that Aurora gently pressed her nose against. The bear made a soft chuffing sound, then settled onto her haunches, waiting patiently as if understanding that they had work to do. The photographer, though clearly intimidated, began capturing images of their interaction, Rebecca guiding Aurora through simple behaviors, the bear responding with eager intelligence, the silent communication flowing between them, requiring no words or exaggerated gestures. "The trust is extraordinary," Zoe commented softly as she adjusted her lens. "I've photographed animal caretakers for years, but I've never seen anything like this." Rebecca smiled, scratching behind Aurora's ears in the spot she loved best. "It goes both ways. I trust her as much as she trusts me." As if to demonstrate this point, Aurora gently took Rebecca's sleeve between her teeth, tugging with careful precision, a behavior they had developed that meant, "Follow me." Rebecca obliged, allowing the bear to lead her toward the small pool in the corner of the interaction space. "She wants to show you something," Rebecca explained to the startled photographer. "This is new behavior. We're still documenting the development of her communication methods." At the pool's edge, Aurora pawed at the water, then looked expectantly at Rebecca. After a moment's consideration, Rebecca knelt and peered into the clear water. There, arranged carefully at the bottom, were several colorful stones that Aurora had collected from various parts of her habitat. "She's making a collection," Rebecca realized aloud, genuine wonder in her voice. "She's been gathering these and placing them here deliberately." Dr. Reynolds approached cautiously, her scientific curiosity evident. Tool use and collection behaviors are extremely rare in bears. This could be significant. Aurora seemed pleased by their reaction, making a satisfied huffing sound before settling beside Rebecca, massive head resting contentedly against her human companion's shoulder, a pose that the photographer captured with quiet awe. Later, as the autumn sun began its early descent, Rebecca sat alone with Aurora in what had become their daily ritual. Quiet time together as the zoo closed and the research teams departed. These moments, free from observation and documentation, were when their bond felt most natural and profound. Aurora lay with her head in Rebecca's lap, eyes half closed in contentment as Rebecca gently stroked her fur and spoke softly about everything and nothing. The Institute received another grant today, she told the bear, who responded with a gentle rumble of acknowledgement. We'll be able to expand the rehabilitation program, help more animals like you. She smiled, remembering the tiny, injured cub Aurora had once been, though none of them will ever be quite like you. A soft chuffing sound, Aurora's version of agreement, made Rebecca laugh. Modest as always. In the distance, the last announcement signaled the zoo's closing. Soon, the night keeper would begin rounds, and Rebecca would return to her small apartment on the zoo grounds, close enough to reach Aurora within minutes if needed, though such emergencies had become increasingly rare. As twilight settled over them, Rebecca found herself reflecting on the journey that had brought them here, the heartbreak of their separation, the joy of reunion, the terror of nearly losing Aurora again to Foster's schemes. All of it had led to this moment of perfect tranquility. You know, she whispered to the drowsy bear, they still don't quite understand what makes our bond special. All the research, all the tests, all the observations. She smiled, leaning down to press her forehead gently against Aurora's massive head. Maybe some things aren't meant to be fully understood. Maybe they're just meant to be treasured. Aurora opened one amber eye, regarding Rebecca with an intelligence that transcended species barriers. Then, in a gesture that never failed to move Rebecca, the bear gently raised her paw and placed it over Rebecca's hand. Connection, protection, affection expressed without words. As darkness fell over Pinewood Zoo, the lonely Grizzly who had once cried for her lost friend now slept peacefully, secure in the knowledge that their bond, once broken, had been restored stronger than before. And Rebecca, watching over her extraordinary companion, knew with absolute certainty that some connections truly do transcend understanding, bridging the divide between species and reminding us of the profound capacity for love that exists in the natural world, waiting only to be recognized. In that quiet moment, with stars appearing overhead and Aurora's steady breathing the only sound, Rebecca realized a simple truth. They had both been lonely, both been searching, both been crying out for reconnection. Their reunion hadn't just saved Aurora, it had saved her too, bringing her back to where she truly belonged.